If a woman marries a pastor, does she marry the ministry as well as the man? Let's talk about it with Jani Ortlund on Steve Brown, etc.
He's an old white guy, an author, broadcaster, and seminary professor who's sick of religion. And he's brought friends. Please welcome Steve Brown, etc.
And we are so glad you're here. You always have a seat at our table. I'm Steve, the aforementioned old white guy. And I have brought friends. Our favorite mega church pastor, Zach Van Dyke, is here. 2020 was rough, but it was also the year Zach learned to make a double doozy cookie.
Oh, that is true. I got really good at baking over last year. Yeah.
Good for you. I'm proud of you, man. Yeah. I think you ought to share the results of your experiments with all of us.
I next time I'm in the studio, I'll bring them.
All right. Matthew Porter is with us. He's kind of like our weather today. He's feeling low in the mid-40s. We'll join hands and pray for you, Matthew, that darkness lifts and the sun shines and you are filled with zest and joy the way a real Christian ought to feel 100%. The time.
He didn't appreciate it.
Yeah, but you got to be careful, Steve, because by the middle of today, the temperature is going to be in the 70s. So Matthew could do some serious aging in a very short period of time.
Well, that means he'll just rain more often.
Matthew, by the way, is our executive producer, and our producer is Jinx, who looks like Jesus. He's working hard in his little glass booth. Jinx can't understand why a store named Target doesn't sell guns and ammo. And he's been checking all of them. Our video director and IT guy, John Myers, is in his tech bunker and has been working from home for nearly a year. You know, John, even the hobbits occasionally came out of the Shire. Eventually, they went on adventures. You could do that. But make sure you're here when we do this program, because we are not technologically
adept.
Well, when I said welcome to Steve Brown, etc., I told you everything I know about technology. Dr. George Bingham is the president of Key Life. George reminds you that money can't buy happiness, but if it can buy barbecue, it's almost the same thing. And Kathy, the soft feminine side of the program, is here. Kathy, since the show will air on Saturday, January the 23rd, just want to remind you, is Happy Pie Day.
No.
Matthew told me something specific I was supposed to say to that, and I think I forgot. Was it and also with you? Totally. I just, oh gosh.
Matthew works so hard on writing these scripts, and we blow it every time.
You know, I get after you all the time for blowing the script, and I was sitting here as you were doing your introduction, and I went, oh, shoot. I forgot what I was supposed to say.
It creates the illusion that the joke would have been
self-righteousness from God.
Matthew, what was I supposed to say?
What?
I can't say it. We'll use it for another one. I don't.
Okay.
I'm very confused.
I'm so sorry.
Talk about the temperature getting into the 70s.
Yeah.
Matthew, Pi Day is March 14th.
What's that?
Pi Day is March 14th.
You must be looking at Canadian Pi Day. My sources say this Saturday.
That's right.
Hey, guys.
Yeah.
Our guest is Jani Ortlund, one of my favorite people. She's a well-known writer, conference speaker. She's the wife of Ray Ortlund Jr., who serves as a pastor to pastors. Jani's a former school teacher. She holds a master's degree in education, serves as executive vice president at Renewal Ministries, and her latest book is titled Help. It's a great title. Help, I'm Married to My Pastor. Encouragement for ministry wives and those who love them. Jani, thanks so much for taking your time to be with us.
Oh, thank you, Steve. What a privilege. I feel so honored. And I'm having so much fun already with you and your team.
we do have fun. And we're quite spiritual at the same time. So you are very honored and very fortunate to be here. And if you believe that, you'll believe anything.
I believe anything you would tell me, Steve. So
that's because I got a deep voice.
That's right.
You can say almost anything and people believe you. It gives you credibility when you don't know anything. And I love it. It's a good place to be. We have here at one time at Key Life, we have over 4,000 pastors on our mailing list, and we created places where they could talk to each other on our website. And then we eventually landed that plane. And one of the things we always said we were going to do is we're going to create a website for pastors' wives. And that happened because so many pastors' wives says, it's nice that you're doing this for my husband, but I'm dying here. And if you would create some help for us, it would be a really good thing. Now, our consultants told us we were we had our fingers in too many pies, and they told us to focus. And so we never got around to it. But at least I know what book to recommend to them. And that's your book. And I've been reading it this morning, and I know, every page is filled with encouragement and wisdom and depth and biblical teaching for wives. Jani, my wife is kind of glad she's not a pastor's wife anymore. She was very good at it, and she ministered to people, and she was incredible as a mother, as a teacher. But when she left the church and she followed me out of the church, we both sort of made an obscene gesture. Well, that's not true, because we love the people and all of that. Did this come from the pain that you've experienced and the reality that you had some things to say to a lot of pastors' wives?
Well, Steve, it really has come. Ray and I've been married 50 years now, almost. We're in our 50th year. And the reason I wrote this book is because I found being a pastor's wife rather a lonely position. My husband automatically made friends in the congregation with his leadership team, with his staff, but I wasn't in all those connections. I wasn't in those meetings, and I found it to be a little bit lonely. And through the years, as we've served and I've spoken with other pastors' wives, they said, Jani, I just want a friend. And I thought, well, I'd love to be their friend, but there's no way I can. So I thought I'd write this book instead, and I'd love for it to feel like a chat from an older friend calling back to younger pastor wives who are in the trenches right now.
So good. And it is that, I want you to know. And by the way, if you're a pastor's wife, this is going to blow you away. You're going to love this book. If you're not clergy, if you're not married to a pastor and you're not a pastor, you're going to love this book too. It's going to give you a new understanding of what the people, those who lead in your church, go through, both the good and the bad. Jani, how did you keep from one of the hard things about being a pastor's wife is you have to stand on the sidelines in the middle of the battle. Your husband gets to get his sword out and go fight the demons, but you can't do that. Or this is what my wife would say, I can't go with you to the battlefield. I can't stand in the gap the way you do. I can't hug the people that you hug and kick the people that need to be. I just can't do that. And so I'm stuck here watching you, and it's killing me. Have you experienced some of that?
Oh, yes, at times. I definitely have. What pastor's wife hasn't, Steve? Anyone who's married to a man in ministry understands what it's like to support from behind the scenes, not to lift up the man who's in ministry from a distance. And that's not always easy.
No, it's really not. And guys, we're going to talk about it throughout the next hour, and you don't want to miss a bit of this. This book is so wise. And if you think it's a book where Jani throws rocks at the church and the lay people in the church, it's not that at all. Her love for the people of God is very clear. Her love for her husband is very clear. Her love for ministry is very clear. But she's honest. And her honesty is refreshing, and frankly, it smells like Jesus. So this is hard work. We're going to rest up and have some cookies and milk. And then, like Jesus, we're going to return. We're talking to author Jani Ortlund about her new book, Help, I'm Married to My Pastor, Encouragement for Ministry Wives and Those Who Love Them. Incidentally, and this won't be true when those of you who are on the radio stations across the country are listening to this program, or when we post the video version of this, and there are thousands of people subscribing to that. But when we're recording it in real time right now, it's the day that Jani's book is being released. And so you can go to Amazon, to our website, to Salem Broadcasting, and you can get that book. This would be a dynamite book for a small church group to study and talk about pastoral ministry and what goes on in the church manse.
I've got a question that I've got to ask. Did you ever, or do you ever love Sundays? Because my wife hates Sundays. She loves church. She loves being in church. She loves that whole experience. But the fact that she has to get all of our kids ready for church by herself, and then when she's at church and the kids want to come up to me, I can see them for a second, but I've got other things that I've got to do during the service, after the service. And so for her, she just like, Zach, Sundays are really, really hard. I don't look forward to them. I'm fine once I'm sitting in my chair, but everything it takes to get there and then get home without much of your help is really tough. So will that get better?
Oh, Zach, I'm with your wife. It will get better once the kids are gone. But
Right. Only 20 years to go.
Right.
And we only had 4 children. You have 6. So my goodness, it is a lot. And plus, I don't know about you, Zach, but Ray, and I believe many pastors are like this, Saturday's a very busy day. For them. Ray would often be doing final prep, or he'd have a wedding or a visitation, something going on Saturday. He wasn't able to take a weekend off. He took another day off with me each week, and we always had fun on our Sabbath.
Right.
But Saturday and Sunday, the weekends were hard for me as a pastor's wife. I loved Sundays because I loved hearing my man preach and give me the word, feeding me as he led me in the Lord. But it was hard getting all those kids in the car, or when we lived overseas and didn't have a car, walking them alone the mile into the village and getting them home again. It was exhausting. And so I did find I needed extra help from the Lord on Sundays or from a good friends. Yeah. Sometimes there will be other women, older women in the church who can care for a pastor's wife with her young children. I have a friend, Beverly, whose church set up what they called the Zoo Patrol. And the Zoo Patrol was a group of women who volunteered to come over on a Sunday morning and help Beverly make sure all the kids had their shoes on and their zippers zipped and all those things they needed done before they got in the car, followed Beverly to church, helped get the kids out of their car seats and into their building, whatever rooms they were to be in. And then Beverly could go into church and find a seat. So Sundays are hard, and maybe some of our listeners can think how they could help their pastor's wife on a Sunday morning enjoy the Sabbath more.
Yeah, man, that Zoo Patrol. I'm gonna suggest that to some people. Kelly has brought our kids before, and a couple of them have not had shoes on. So it's happened. It's happened.
It's worse when Kelly finds she's gotten there without her shoes, though.
Right. That's true.
When you got 6, you can leave some of them home, and nobody will even notice.
That's true too.
I thought he had 6. I can empathize with that because my wife has to get our babies ready and with very little help from me. And it's sad because I'm right there. I'm not a pastor.
You're just
there's
bad.
just it is what it is.
Not okay, Matthew.
But I think you have a really interesting point here about the empathy, that just to stop and think about the logistics. I never have. I'm like, oh yeah, whatever, you preach and this is the family and everything. You're like, no, stop and think about what this woman has to do to make all of this happen. Do you find that there's kind of a different sets of assumptions, incorrect assumptions that people have about a pastor's wife, that, she knows everything the exact same way her husband does, or?
Well, of course, she's
married to this guy, so she must have it all together.
Yeah, there are a lot of unseen, kind of hidden expectations of the pastor's wife. And really, they're not all bad. I think that it's a glorious position to be married to a servant of Christ who has set his life apart to serve him all of his life. You get to be married to that man. So there are wonderful privileges with being married to a pastor. You get to enter into other people's lives more deeply because of his care for the flock. But there are those disadvantages, those hidden expectations that are not always clear, but they're very real. Even coming back to Sunday morning, I think it'd be great if women in the congregation looked for the pastor's wife and invited her to sit with them, because she never has her husband to sit with, unless in some churches the pastor's wife will sit up front with her husband, but not in everyone. So even that feeling of walking into the congregation, where should I sit? I'll be alone again this Sunday. That can be something that a pastor's wife lives with. I think some of the other expectations, well, for me, they centered around being present at every church meeting, at every church shower, at every Sunday school picnic and event. Remembering people's names. Oh, that's a hard one for me. I'm a visual learner, so name tags, I love name tags, and I often look at the tag rather than the person's face. But expectations like that, people want to be known. It's a little bit easier for the pastor to know them. Somehow they expect the couple to know them, and the wife isn't always privy to the names and the situations around certain families.
Yeah, that's so true. And I've found I have to be careful about letting my wife know when someone hurts my feelings, because normally I will, resolve it with them. She never does. So she goes around really angry at people that I'm fine with now. Yeah, right.
You guys don't know Jani and Ray Ortlund, but they are as authentic. I mean, the people in their churches didn't have to ask. They're so honest and so open. In fact, I worry about them sometimes that they don't wear any armor and they don't have a mean streak. Both of those are necessary for 21st century ministry. But we'll talk about that when we get back. And we're talking to Jani Ortlund. The book is great. Help, I'm Married to My Pastor. Encouragement for ministry wives and those who love them. Get this book and read it. You'll be amazed at the wisdom and the warmth. Hey, thanks for joining us. We're hanging out with speaker and author Jani Ortlund. You can keep up with her at renewalministries.com and on Twitter at Jani, and that's spelled Jani, Ortlund, Ortland.
U-L-U-N-D. Sorry if I wrote it wrong.
Say
L-U-N-D.
Oh, sorry. Listen, I'm working hard at this, and I'm hurt and sensitive that you would criticize me.
I know
that way. I could end up shedding tears on this broadcast because of my tender sensitivities. And you do it again, and I'll fire you. Okay. Kathy, you had a question.
Well, I just wanted to make, before I ask my question, I wanted to make a comment when you were talking about, like somebody sitting with the pastor's wife or her having to come in and sit alone. I remember distinctly, and this is a lot of years ago, when you, Steve, decided that you weren't going to sit on the platform anymore. During the service, you were going to sit in the front row with Anna and the girls. We almost had mass rebellion over that from the congregation. I mean, they wrote letters, and it was like you would have thought that he had become the abomination of desolation. I mean,
They got a petition and sent it with the president of the women in the church with like 200 or 300. And you know what I did with her standing in front of my desk? I tore it up.
Steve, you're now my new.
I paid a price for that. I want you to know that, but it sure felt good for about 5 minutes and threw it in the trash can. That's why I'm no longer a pastor.
Jani,
Go ahead, Kathy.
Jani, I did want to ask you, though, I've been in the church for well over 50 years, and it seems to me that as an outsider, just a congregant, see that there are, I don't know if the proper terminology is less requirements or different requirements or better understanding, somewhat, not totally, of course, as to what should be required or expected or whatever of a pastor's wife than there was 50 or 60 years ago. Do you see in any of that? I'm looking at some of the wives of pastors, like in the church that I currently attend or just recently attended, and there's just doesn't seem to be as much assumed as far as how much running of the church and, all of that they're going to be required to do, or expected. It's probably a better term, expected to do. Is that true?
Oh, I think it is, Kathy. I see the same thing over the last 5 decades, a change, but we see it in our culture too, in what it means to be a wife, a homemaker. We see women spreading their wings and expanding what they do in so many different ways. So I think it pertains to the pastor's wife as well. The expectations aren't quite as stringent, should I say? I find now in my 70s that our pastors' wives at church have more freedom to pursue their own pursuits and not just be known as the pastor's wife. She's known as herself. Oftentimes she's working and not always in the church. One of the things that I think contributes to that is our plethora of social media these days, and how many ways you can get to know a woman through her Facebook, through her Twitter. Maybe she has a podcast. There are so many different ways. So she's not just, if I may put that word in quotation marks, not just a pastor's wife. There are still some, though, who want to get to know the pastor through the pastor's wife. They figure they can get in close with the pastor if they can somehow get in close with the pastor's wife. I don't think that has changed.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Well,
You see that. Go ahead, George.
well, I was going to say, just to kind of follow that, and maybe even not a sort of relationship, but just kind of trying to get a message to the pastor or whatever through the pastor's spouse. Do you see that, or have you seen that?
Oh, I do, and I have, and I'd love to speak to that. How much time do we have? 3 hours?
Janet, you can't cuss on this broadcast. I just want you to know that.
All right, Steve, then take it from here. My mouth is shut.
I
Well,
would
that cut her off.
like to know your canned response to that, though, just so that I can tell my wife you can say this back when they try to pass a note through you.
That's a teaser, Zach, and we'll use it to make sure that people will return with us when we return, because you're going to get some R-rated stuff from Jana on this broadcast. And if you've been trying to get a message to your pastor through your pastor's spouse, you do it again, you'll get the fever and die. Because now you will know the truth. And the truth will cause you to be quiet, to stop doing things like that. Guys, we're gonna back out. Gotta have commercials and pay for this thing. But like Jesus, we are going to return. You're listening to Steve Brown, etc., and we're so glad you're here. And we are so glad that Jani Ortlund is too. One of the good things about, at least in my case, being really old, you can say whatever you want. And Jana's not nearly as old. She looks like she's 30-something, and it drives me nuts. But she's been around a while. And she always said what she thought, but she's just saying it a little bit louder than she used to. And you ought to get this book. It is just a great book. Help, I'm Married to My Pastor. It'll give you some insight about what goes on in the church manse or the pastor's house. And you might be really surprised.
Jani, in the last segment, we seemed to touch on something that seemed like it was on the verge of triggering you into a stream of foul language, which, we
You cut it off just in time.
just in time. Okay, that would probably be okay now on YouTube. But anyway, we were talking about when someone tries to use a pastor's spouse as a channel of communication to get a subtle message, or maybe a not so subtle message to the pastor.
Yeah.
What are the options for a ministry spouse?
Well, there aren't a lot of options. Either she can absorb it and take it to her husband, or she can give it back to the person who's speaking to her. For years, I absorbed it. And I thought, this person is an important person in our church. They really must be speaking the truth. I really should tell Ray. And I'd come home on a Sunday evening after he had preached twice in the morning and a different sermon Sunday night, and we'd talk through the day. And I would try to tell very kindly, of course, what Mrs. McGillicuddy had said, whether it was which side of his suit coat he should wear his lapel mic on, to how to pronounce the missionary's name, to whatever it was. And, I found I was infected with what a lot of pastors' wives are infected with. I call it fix him fever. We just feel if we can fix our husbands, then the church will do fine. Then everything will go perfectly. And I remember one Sunday night when I was just chattering away to Ray. And he was so dear. He was trying to listen, but eventually he just took me in his arms and took my face and turned it to look up at him. And I looked into those big blue eyes and finally got quiet. And he said, "Darling, I just need to tell you something." I said, "Okay, honey, what is it?" He said, "You need to know that every man walking on the face of the earth today needs something." I thought, okay, what? He said, every man needs just one person, only one, who likes him, who isn't trying to change him, who thinks he's okay the way he is. And then Ray asked me one of the most important questions he ever asked me after, "Will you marry me?" He said, "Would you be willing to be that person for me?"
Oh, my.
Oh, wow.
And oh, boy, was I. I didn't want anybody else signing up for that job. It's mine, me. Yes, let me. And it turned a corner in our ministry marriage where I left fix him fever behind. And I stopped being the bridge that people could walk on between their concerns and my husband, when they'd come up and say, "Oh, I know Ray is so busy. Could you just mention this to him?" Or, "Oh, I don't want to bother your husband. Would you just say?" Eventually, what I learned to do was keep his assistant's phone number on little slips of paper in my pocket. I'd pull them out and I'd say, "Well, that's very interesting. Here's his assistant's number. Give her or him a call. I'm sure you'd get a lot better action if you talk to Ray yourself."
Maybe you should have given him a fake number and said, "Here, call somebody who cares."
Oh, man, the criticism is a big deal in the church to church leaders. It really is. I remember I tried to grow a mustache when I was a very young pastor, and it was awful. Looked terrible. And this lady called me and said, "I saw you at the post office." And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "What's that on your upper lip?" And I said, "It's a mustache." And she said, "Shave it off. It looks horrible. Looks horrible." And I said, "You know something? I think you're too fat, but I don't tell you so." Again, I paid a price for it. Sometimes it's worth it. Sometimes it's worth it.
Oh,
Jani, we talked about you're kind of in the public eye. Everybody has their eyes on you.
Mm-hmm.
I have to imagine it's like being in a microscope. And I think with kids, that's got to be even more so because there's an expectation of you're the pastor's kids. You've got this wonderful wife. these should be model little citizens, these little glue sniffers who are just, various ages. But that's not a fair expectation, is it? What's that like, that kind of level of scrutiny?
That's not fair at all. Your kids didn't ask to be born into a pastor's family. Ray and I really had to work through this. We have three sons and one daughter. And we tried to practice 3 different ways of helping our kids being raised in a pastor's home. One was to protect them. Our kids had to be protected from the comparers who compared them to the previous pastor's kids, who always were perfect, of course, or the critics. I didn't want our kids hearing people criticize different people in the church, or even, I don't know, Steve, what you would call them. We sometimes call them the crazies. My publisher wouldn't let me call them that in my book. I had to call them the characters. But in every church, in every community, there are certain people that don't make sense to our kids. And we, as their parents, have the privilege of protecting them from those characters that our kids can't quite interpret. And they know they're supposed to be polite, but they don't know how to deal with it. We not only wanted to protect them, we wanted to persuade them that being in ministry is wonderful, that serving Jesus is such a blessing. And the only way we could do that was by living it out. They saw us up front, close, day by day. The final thing we tried to do was praise them. I tried to praise them in front of their father, in front of other church members, for any good, lovely, sweet, kind thing I saw them do.
Oh, that's so good.
Oh, Jana, we're out of time, and I just absolutely hate it. You're a delight, an authentic delight. You're the real deal, and for this cynical old preacher, I need that on occasion. I'm so glad you wrote this book. And I hope you'll keep writing, and I hope that you'll come back and join us again.
I'd love to, Steve. Thank you so much for this privilege.
Thanks, Jani.
Thanks, Kathy.
And don't forget to get the book, Help, I'm Married to My Pastor, Encouragement for Ministry Wives and Those Who Love Them. Guys, we're going to come back at the other side of the break. And we'll tell you who we're going to do it unto next week. You'll be surprised. You're listening and have been listening to Steve Brown, etc. And it's been great having you with us. One of the things that I had to deal with when I was a seminary professor was I felt challenged to tell students the truth because many of them were getting chewed up by the church. And so I told them horror stories that were real. And I said, you listen, they didn't like it. And I said, you'll call me someday and you'll thank me for telling you about this. And I taught them politics in the church, how to deal with controversy, how to develop a mean streak without losing your salvation, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the things I got convicted about, I made it so bad and so I said to the students, look, if I've made this so bad that you're going to leave the seminary and go do something else, raise your hand because I'll tell you some good stuff. And one time, one student said, Dr. Brown, you got to say something nice about the church. And I started talking about people and experiences and being on the front row of what God was doing. And you guys are not going to believe this, but I got really emotional. I had to stop. We're honest about the church, and we're honest about how hard it is for both the people in the church and its leaders But don't forget that she's the bride of Christ. And there is so much that is, and that's not one of my words, but glorious. And we shouldn't forget it. And all of us on this broadcast love the church and are part of it. So, as Augustine said, she's a prostitute, but she's my mother. And if you've been around long, you know exactly what he was saying. Kathy, who's going to be on next week?
Well, next week, we have a guest host, Matthew. Will be hosting next week.
Great.
Look at me. And our guest is a gentleman named Arden Bevere, and his book is titled Redefined, and the subtitle is Confronting the Labels That Limit Us. And we wanted to make sure that Zach was going to be here because this deals directly with millennials and some of the preconceived ideas that us old people have about millennials.
That's right. We're going to set you right.
Yeah,
I'm right in the cusp.
Preconceived. We've got your number, dummy. We know because we're old. Okay. Guys, you don't want to miss next week. Be here, same time, same place. And between now and then, don't do anything we wouldn't. And that gives you a wide, wide berth.